So before we begin, we would like to thank Ms. Masako Toki, her staff, and the graduate students in CIF for making this conference possible. And we would also like to thank the teams that have gone before us for their hard work and for their amazing presentations. We especially want to thank the keynote speaker, Mr. John Wolfstall from Global Zero, for his thought-provoking remarks. It was truly inspiring to hear about his experiences and the challenges working with the government and his insights on the different aspects of the nuclear ban treaty.
That being said, we would like to start our presentation by introducing our team. Can you press? I am Arjun Katechia.
Oh, sorry.
It's not working.
Right.
For some reason,
Wait, it's here, right?
The arrow?
Oh,
okay.
cool.
Okay. So that being said, we would like to start our presentation by introducing our team. I am Arjun Katechia.
I'm Kaki Su.
And we are both 11th graders at Choate Rosemary Hall. We would also like to acknowledge our teammate on the right who couldn't make it today. His name is Charlie Yockey, and he contributed significantly to this presentation and the paper. We would also like to thank our team advisor and mentor, Mr. James Davidson, who's sitting in the back over there, for his wisdom and support for making this project possible. Thank you. Even though we all attend the same school, we are actually from very different places. I am from Glastonbury, a small town in Connecticut in the northeastern part of the United States.
And I am actually from Fukuoka, Japan. So for those of you who are from Japan today, konnichiwa.
And Charlie is from Springfield, Illinois. Can you press it? Now we would like to introduce our school, Choate Rosemary Hall. It's a boarding school and it's located in Wallingford, a town in southern Connecticut. This drone shot captures our campus and some of its buildings.
Now that we have introduced ourselves, we want to share our thoughts on the issues of nuclear nonproliferation and disarmament. Our presentation will be split into roughly 3 parts. The history of some important treaties, especially the 2017 Nuclear Weapon Ban Treaty, an introduction of and summary of our multi-pronged approach, and finally, we will be open to answering any question you all may have.
We will first begin with an introduction to the history of nuclear weapons negotiations. A major agreement regarding nuclear weapons was the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, colloquially known as the NPT, which opened in 1968. With its 3 pillars, disarmament, non-proliferation, and peaceful uses of nuclear weapons, the NPT aimed to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons, peacefully develop nuclear energy, and work towards disarming countries. Only 4 states, India, Israel, Pakistan, and South Sudan, have not signed the treaty. This treaty is widely viewed as the first step towards a global movement toward disarmament. While the NPT has been the most comprehensive treaty with regards to nuclear weapons, inevitably, the move towards total nuclear disarmament has been pretty challenging. One major problem with this treaty has been the loose mechanism to ensure compliance. Disarmament is loosely regulated. The forum to discuss the commitment to this pillar and its implementation has not yet proven to be successful. Another major issue with this treaty is the unequal power dynamic that it creates. In banning non-nuclear nations from acquiring nuclear weapons or intelligence, this reserves a great amount of power for the nations that do have nuclear capabilities. Because of the sharply divided power dynamic that this treaty keeps in place, more effective methods of disarmament must be pursued. The next treaty that I will mention is the START, or Strategic Arms Reduction Talks. These began in 1982 and finalized in 1991, and they occurred between the United States and the Soviet Union, in which there were a series of talks that resulted in the large-scale reduction in the nuclear arsenals of both countries. These sets of negotiations catalyzed an ongoing conversation between the US and Russia regarding disarmament, which manifested itself in other sets of negotiations called START II and New START, which also both resulted in the large-scale reduction of the nuclear arsenals of both countries. Since then, on a global scale, more progress has been made towards disarming nations throughout the world. In 2017, the United Nations passed the Nuclear Weapon Ban Treaty, a binding treaty with the intention that it act in concert with the NPT. Specifically, it provides an effective method for implementing Article 4 of the NPT. In other words, the 2017 treaty aims to effectively disarm all of the NPT member nations. It does so by prohibiting member nations from acquiring nuclear weapons as a moral and legal obligation. Furthermore, this treaty aims to prevent nations from developing and testing new nuclear weapons and maintaining nuclear stockpiles. Thus far, there are 57 countries on the signatory list. However, a concerning reality is that the nuclear weapon states and countries under their nuclear umbrella, even Japan, have refused to sign the treaty. Although we fully respect and agree with the intentions and goals behind this treaty, we believe that there needs to be intermediate steps in order to bridge the gap between nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states when pursuing nuclear disarmament.
The plan that our team proposes come in a fourfold process: delethalization, delegitimization, minimization, and finally elimination. And we believe that the US must take a leadership role in all four phases. This is not necessarily a step-by-step process, but rather they are closely related and intertwined. We believe that these steps, combined with the stigmatization that the 2017 treaty aims to put forth, they would complement each other to make a nuclear weapons-free world a more achievable goal. Now we will explain the phases of our plans in detail. In the context of nuclear nonproliferation, delethalization is the term that our team came up to express the process of making existing nuclear weapons less dangerous. As we all know, the power of nuclear weapons is truly formidable. They have the capacity to destroy whole cities within seconds. As a first step towards minimizing or eliminating nuclear weapons, we believe that it is essential to first establish an environment where nuclear weapons are less of a threat. Currently, each nuclear-capable country has its own system for launching a nuclear strike. In most countries, that power rests in a single figure in the government. For example, in the United States, although there is no such thing as a physical nuclear button, the president alone has the power to launch an atomic weapon in approximately 15 minutes. In order to avoid accidents and errors, this step should be made significantly more complicated than it is right now. Specifically, nuclear weapons should be taken off high alert status immediately. Just in the US, there are approximately 2,000 nuclear weapons on high alert status, which means that they could be launched within only a few minutes. This increases the risk of catastrophic accidents or miscalculations, and this dangerous situation must be addressed immediately. Furthermore, there should be more layers of approval in the process, including approval from the Congress and the military leadership to lower the possibility of a nuclear strike. Perhaps the creation of a joint committee which would assess the validity of nuclear strike could be helpful in strengthening the process even more. This would significantly lower the risk of existing nuclear weapons in the arsenal becoming a tangible threat. In addition, the expansion of nuclear-free zones could play a significant role in delethalization. During the 1980s and 90s, there was a worldwide movement where countries, cities, or towns even within nuclear weapon states declared themselves as nuclear-free zones. These movements were spurred by a heightened awareness of citizens, and we must bring back these trends through further education and discussion. Not only do they protect the area designated as nuclear-free, these movements, especially within the nuclear weapon countries, also bring positive pressure to bear on governments to pursue disarmament. The next step is delegitimization of nuclear weapons. Delegitimization refers to depriving the justifications behind nuclear weapons, and this involves a two-part process. First, reducing the role of nuclear weapons, which includes delegitimizing the use of nuclear weapons. And second, depriving the legitimacy of the weapon in its entirety. The effect of nuclear weapons on human health and the environment is truly catastrophic, as seen in these graphic images from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Today's weapons are 100 times more powerful. Not only does it cause significant number of casualties within seconds, but the effects of the radiation continues to inflict severe damage on human beings decades later. In terms of environmental damage, Needless to say, it destroys countless buildings within a vast radius. It also leaves long-lasting effects on the climate. Based on these humanitarian concerns, the delegitimization of the use of nuclear weapons has been taking place for decades. In 1996, the International Court of Justice declared that, quote, "The threat or use of nuclear weapons would generally be contrary to the rules of international law applicable in armed conflict, and in particular the principles and rules of humanitarian law," end quote. This makes it clear that the use of them in any way is illegal and against international judicial standards. In order to promote the position that the use of nuclear power is illegitimate, we believe that the US must declare a no first use policy. This declaration would officially recognize the role of nuclear weapons solely as a defensive force and not a preemptive one. Currently, only China among the major powers has officially adopted a no first use policy and has been a strong advocate for it. On the other hand, the United States has refused to adopt the no first use policy, declaring that it reserves the right to use nuclear weapons in the case of conflict. However, the United States must recognize the contradiction between this claim and its justification of nuclear weapons as primarily a deterrent force. As former US Vice President Joe Biden has said in January 2017, quote, deterring or retaliating against a nuclear attack should be the sole purpose of US nuclear arsenal, end quote. A no first use policy by the United States would not only delethalize the direct threat of that nuclear weapons could be used in any situation, but the US would also be establishing an international norm that it is unacceptable and unjustifiable to use nuclear weapons in any way other than for self-defense. Now, delegitimizing the existence of nuclear warheads is a very difficult and complex process. However, it can be extremely impactful if achieved. The possession of nuclear weapons is most commonly justified by their role as a deterrent to major military conflicts between countries who possess them. However, we would like to challenge this conception. There is considerable research that has demonstrated that the deterrent power of nuclear weapons is overrated. Although the lack of major world wars since 1945 is almost universally attributed to the fear of a nuclear war, there is, in fact, no evidence that the Soviet and the US leaders were determined to go to war at any particular time and were only deterred by the existence of the other's nuclear weapons. In fact, it is not the development of nuclear weapons alone, but also the fear of the gruesome atrocities and mass destruction seen in World War II that has deterred the major powers from an all-out war. Some might question the effectiveness of delegitimizing nuclear weapons, as it is more of a conceptual and theoretical than a material progress. However, changing the universal perception of nuclear weapons as legitimate or practical weapons is perhaps one of the most significant steps towards disarmament. The threat of nuclear weapons comes not so much from their physical use, but because of the recognition of its value as a deterrent. And thus, addressing the conceptions surrounding the power of nuclear weapons is essential to start a process of minimization.
The next step towards effectively disarming nations, a key goal of the Nuclear Weapon Ban Treaty, is minimizing the number of nuclear weapons that nuclear weapon states have. While complete elimination of nuclear weapons is not feasible in the short run due to the lack of trust within observant nations, gradually decreasing nuclear arsenals will lead to their elimination within the long run. In order to minimize the number of nuclear weapons, we recommend that the United States must take the lead because it is the most influential nation in this arena and it can set the standard for future disarmament. Our plan calls for the U.S., similar to the START talks, to initiate a cascade of negotiations between Russia and other nuclear weapon states. To start these negotiations, the U.S. would destroy a significant number of nuclear weapons and urge other nations to join. We recommend that it destroys half of its nuclear weapons. The strong moral pressure from this action by a nation as influential as the U.S., perhaps combined with some economic aid, would be strong incentives for other nations to follow suit. Furthermore, it must be pointed out that the building of thousands of nuclear weapons is a huge financial burden. At its current weapons level, the United States has 6,800 nuclear weapons, with a cost of each weapon being between $18 million and $53 million US dollars. The US has spent an estimated $1.2 to $3.6 trillion on nuclear weapons alone since 1940. Furthermore, the cost of their maintenance has driven this number to a staggering $5 trillion US dollars. As this image shows, Russia and the United States do have many retired nuclear warheads whose cost of maintenance is unnecessary and exorbitant. The cost of just one nuclear weapon could be allocated to many different sectors of a nation's economy: the education sector, health and wellness, and especially to combat climate change, to develop clean energy and improve water purification. The positive effect that this would have on an economy would also serve as an incentive for other nations to follow. This infographic here succinctly summarizes the opportunity costs of nuclear weapons. One interesting fact that this infographic shows that the redirection of the annual US budget of $55 billion a year for nuclear weapons could lift 500 million people out of poverty. Another mind-boggling example that this infographic gives, you can't see it up there, but it's below, is that building a girls' school in Pakistan costs $72,000. Far less than the cost of just one nuclear weapon, with a far greater positive effect. The eventual objectives of both the NPT and NWBT is complete disarmament, the total elimination of nuclear weapons from all nations in the world. While short-term elimination of nuclear weapons isn't feasible, gradual disarmament will prove essential for reaching this long-term goal. We propose that the U.S. take the lead in disarming itself and redirects the money saved towards humanitarian purposes. Our hope is that other countries will also follow the lead, and the U.S. that will use its resources to create new jobs in other vital sectors of the economy. What we mean by this is that engineers and scientists who currently work in the weapons industry can be redirected to use their skills to work on peaceful nuclear technology projects and to other jobs that would lead to advancements in energy, transportation, and other areas that would be for the common good. In the long run, in accordance with the 2017 treaty, total nuclear elimination is paramount to preserving humanity and can be achieved with our four-step process.
So to summarize, our proposed solution consists of 4 parts. First, delethalizing nuclear weapons, which is essentially making them safer by complicating the process of launching a nuclear strike and expanding nuclear-free zones. Second, delegitimizing nuclear weapons through eliminating the notion that deterrence is safer. Third, the minimization of nuclear arsenals in nuclear-positive countries, and eventually, in accordance with NPT and the 2017 ban treaty, the elimination of nuclear weapons. We believe that this process, with the initiative of the United States, will complement the current efforts made by non-nuclear states to stigmatize nuclear weapons through the Nuclear Weapon Ban Treaty. In combination, they will significantly facilitate the current efforts in making the world a more stable and peaceful place.
Before we open up our proposal to questions, we feel that it is important to address what many may see as a major problem with our proposal. Some may believe that the steps that we have put forward are not realistic given the current political climate and are incompatible with the current U.S. administration. We can see that they might not be taken seriously with the current U.S. administration and by today's leaders, but as we've said throughout this presentation, they should be. Our solutions are ambitious, far-reaching, and idealistic. And we would like to ask you not to mistake this idealism for naivete, for we sought to propose what ought to be done as opposed to what can be done at this current moment. We are not in the business of protecting the future, and we do not pretend to be. All we can say for sure is that America and the world would be a much safer, stable, and happy place to live if this proposal were taken seriously. We refuse to compromise on solutions to an issue as important as this. Now, if anybody has any questions, we would be happy to answer them to the best of our ability. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
How long do you think it would be good for to launch a nuclear weapon? Because you said it currently takes 15 minutes. How much longer do you think it should take?
So I think it really depends on the situation, but 15 minutes is definitely too short. I think that it should be, if not within hours, it should be a multi-day process that includes appropriate discussions with different committees and different leaderships other than just the president.
Thank you.
I was really curious where you got the information graphic about where the money could be spent better. Yeah, go back.
That one?
Yeah, that one. Where'd you get that?
I have the link on my computer, but I found it online. It's actually a graphic that has much more to it. So we have a handout that we're going to hand out to people, and on that handout is a full infographic. I can give you the link after, but if you want to see the full infographic, you'll see it on the handout.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Miharu. I'm from Hiroshima. I have a question. Do you also think Japan should take initiative? How about how do you think the Japan rule?
I think that Japan can definitely take a strong leadership role, especially within the context of non-nuclear weapon states. Our proposal is basically a reaction to the nuclear ban treaty, as we think that one of the main issues in the nuclear ban treaty is this wide gap between non-nuclear weapon states and nuclear weapon states. And Japan, as Mr. Wolfstall has said, is in this ambiguous position where they can't take an extreme, and they're conflicted between their nuclear umbrella alliance with the U.S. and their passion to achieve a non-nuclear world. So I think that the Japan should take the initiative among the non-nuclear states to call for the humanitarian concerns, and also they're reflecting on their history to for this movement. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I really liked your presentation to start. I'm just wondering if the U.S., if there was news that the U.S. was being attacked with nuclear power, do you think it would still be appropriate to spend a few days discussing and debating the options to use in response?
So our main proposal of complicating the process was mainly in the context of not using it as a first strike policy. So currently, as we said in our presentation, the U.S. does have the power to use launch a nuclear strike at any moment as the president wish. So our proposal to complicate the process is mainly because that is possible in the United States right now. I think that you made a good point that because retaliating against a nuclear strike is also one of the main purposes of the U.S. to use nuclear weapons, there could be another procedure in that case. But yeah, that was an interesting point, though.
Yeah,
so
I'd
thank
also
you.
like to add on. So if we believe that the U.S. shouldn't obviously have that power to attack first within 15 minutes, but I think maybe if we added a little part of our proposal, if the U.S. were attacked, then maybe they could be able to launch a nuclear weapon or nuclear strike much more quickly. I think that's definitely a fair addition, and one that addresses the counter argument that you brought up.
Thank you. You both did really great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I believe that you guys are against first strike policy, but let's just say the United States is being attacked by another country, hypothetically North Korea, without nuclear weapons. Like, let's say they brought their fighter jets and they were dropping bombs in the U.S., but they weren't nuclear bombs, they were just standard dumb bombs. Do you think that the U.S. should have the power to launch a nuclear weapon in such an instance of that attack or not?
My personal belief is that no, they shouldn't have that power because nuclear weapons are the most destructive bombs out there. But I mean, I think that no, I just don't think that nuclear weapons should be used in retaliation. Rather, like less harmful bombs, even though bombs are very harmful, would be the best option.
Okay, thank you.
That's just a personal opinion.
Question, yeah. Hi. I really like your
Hi.
plan. I think it has amazing potential. I just have one question. In terms of countries that are not open to like collaborate, let's say countries such as Russia, countries such as North Korea under leadership of Putin and Kim Jong-un, how would you approach those countries in terms of implementing this sort of plan?
You're asking about how the other countries will follow the U.S.'s initiative?
Yeah, basically,
Okay,
like
so-
if US takes initiative.
Yeah, we've basically mentioned the strong moral pressure piece, that U.S. is the very, if not the most, a very influential country in this world right now. And we hope that because of the fear of some actions that the U.S. might take, potential actions that they can take against those countries, that they will follow against their strong coalition. The other piece is maybe some economic incentives, perhaps like lowering tariffs or like providing economic aids to those countries who will follow the U.S.'s initiative.
And what we see in the world today is that the main use for nuclear weapons is as a deterrence force. So if the U.S. disarms, say, half of their nuclear arsenal, then other countries won't need to have as many nuclear weapons. So it'll be an incentive for them because they won't need those nuclear weapons for the purpose of deterrence. Also, as we outlined here, there are great opportunity costs of having nuclear weapons. Having those costs, that cost of maintenance is very high. So not having nuclear weapons would be so beneficial for economies. Nuclear workers also wouldn't be in too much debt if nuclear weapons were eradicated, because they could translate their skills to so many different sectors of a nation's economy. So it's a win-win situation.
It's brilliant. Thank you.